Hello again. Being that today is week 7 of my quit, I figured I would write something up or talk about something that's been near and dear to my heart, which is the act of taking personal responsibility for your actions. In a previous attempt at this video, I used some examples that I didn't think were useful. I mean, they're good examples, but I'm not going to try to turn this into an overtly political video. I'm going to just try to keep it as generic as possible. I think I can still use generic things to make my point. So, one of the things that I've noticed with our culture at the moment is that there is a tendency to blame everyone else for your problems. I'm talking to you. I'm also talking to myself because I've done this in the past. There are people who blame systems for their problems, the courts, the police, big companies, pharmaceutical companies, the government, their state government, the sheriff's department. People of certain colors are blamed for problems. There's certainly been an uptick in blaming white people for a lot of the problems in the world. And while we certainly do have our fair share of mistakes made, this trend of blaming everyone else for the problems that you as an individual face, it has some effects on your life. And that's what I want to go over. I want to go over my observation, my understanding, my experience, and compare what happens when you blame other people with what happens when you blame yourself and you take responsibility for what's going on in your life. So we're going to start with blaming other people. It's pretty simple. You have a problem. Your problem is that you don't have a lot of money and that you feel like you're kind of a peon in a big system. You blame other people. Maybe you blame systemic discrimination, or you blame a company or a series of companies who didn't employ you for as much money as you wanted, or perhaps fired you because of whatever reason, and you're blaming them all for these problems. Maybe you blame your family members for not taking care of you. Maybe you blame maybe you don't even blame people as such, you blame systems. Like I said earlier with systemic discrimination, blaming systemic discrimination is such an effective way to disseminate responsibility, because you don't even have to target a group of people. You don't even have to make the point or make the argument against the group of people who have actions and behaviors and motivations. You can just say, oh, it's the system. And this puts it entirely out of reach. And what it puts it out of reach for, or rather what it puts it out of reach of, is your being able to change it. Because we can assume that if you're in a position that you don't want to be in, and there's a position you do want to be in, that if this is the position that you're in and you don't want to be in it and you want to get to here, something has to change. Your position has to change. And when you blame other people, what you're essentially doing is saying, other people are responsible for my situation. I can't change them at all, so therefore my situation can't change. But something has to change in order for you to go from here to here. Likewise, if you're here, you want to get over to here, something has to change. That position has to change. Some kind, like with my hands right now, what changes is the motor function of my arms pulling one over to the other side. If I just leave them here like this and say, well, it's out of my control, then I can't do anything about that and I can't bring these hands together. Again, as that works, so too in society does blaming other people work in absolving you from having to do anything and having to make changes or take action. And again, particularly with blaming systems, you're giving it up to an even higher level of power, essentially. You're saying that this isn't even about people, and that even if I could convince them to change the way that they did, it's not there. The system is broken. So, you blame other people, or systems, or government, or companies, or whatever, and these are all things that you cannot change. Even blaming someone who's the closest person to you, even blaming your wife or your husband or your best friend or a brother or sister or your parents, even by blaming that person, you have taken away your ability to make a change in going from here to here. And I think that's key in blaming others for your problems and not taking responsibility for your own actions and for your own decisions. No matter who it is that you blame, even if it's the closest person that you, even if you are here, even if it's the closest thing to you that you're blaming, the fact that you are taking responsibility away means that you are giving it to someone else who you cannot influence. Really, you can't influence their actions or behaviors. And even if you could, you're only going to be able to influence it in a limited amount of way, because that person, let's say it's your brother or sister, they only have a limited amount of give a fucks about you. You have to excuse the French here. But they only have a limited, and they may love you unconditionally, but they have their own motivation and their own life to live. So for them to change their entire way of being to fit or satisfy you is unlikely. And we see it in the world. People who do those things ultimately are very unhappy people because they live for everyone else. People pleasers are a good example of this. People who want to be liked by everyone, so they do what everyone tells them to do and they don't do anything that they want to do. And in the end, they become deeply unhappy because they've never spent their life doing the things that they want to do. They don't fulfill their own goals, their own needs. All right, so getting back on track. You've blamed someone else. You've blamed a system or whatever, and that's a thing that cannot change, or will not change, or will only change a little bit and not enough to satisfy what you need. Because you cannot change. Let me try that again. Because you cannot change what those people, that person, or that system are doing to suit you, you accomplish zero. Like we talked about, like I said with these, right? My two hands. If I cannot change the position of one of these hands, they cannot come together. They cannot change their position. And in the same way, people that blame other people for their problems accomplish very little. Outside of talking and sort of the basics, the mundanity of life. These people are also unhappy because they've given up responsibility to others for their ability to live the life that they want to live. They don't get to live the life that they want to live, and they don't get the benefit of working hard and accomplishing something. They don't get the benefit of seeing their goals being achieved, or learning, maybe failing and learning from failure is one of the most. It's heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's tremendously liberating to know that you can try something and fail, and it's not a big deal. For me personally, that phrase. For me as a human being, I hated failure. I tried to move away from it as much as possible, and I tried to insulate myself from failure. And I did that by blaming other people for my problems in a lot of cases. But the more I began to understand what I was doing was foolish, and I moved on to doing things that allowed me to fail, I had the failure, and then afterwards I had that realization that, oh, it was actually okay because I learned this and I won't make that mistake the next time. This is particularly useful when you're quitting drugs. You may not quit on the first time you try, but you'll learn something about yourself when you fail that first time, and you'll go, okay, I can remove that from the equation now, and the next time I try, I'll go a little further. And then I fail, and then I remove that hurdle. And then as you go along, you get further and further along until all of a sudden you've quit drugs. And you've done it under your own steam from having learned things. And this is tremendously fulfilling. Because you're learning about yourself, and as a result, you're also learning about people in general. Whereas if you blame other people for your problems, you won't have those issues. You won't be looking to make change yourself. And so you won't go through the hardships and the failures where you learn more about yourself and you become sort of more of a character. You become a more interesting person as a result. You won't have that. And one of the things that means is that you are probably going to be less likely to start or keep or maintain a family. Partners generally don't tend to want to be around people who are not self-starters. And while there are a lot of automatic losers out there who have found themselves someone to come inside and make babies, 9 times out of 10 what I witnessed in that situation is that they're both losers. They're both people who blame others. And I think that they're less likely to have and start families in a healthy way. I mean, these are people who have gotten together with other losers or other people who blame other people for their problems, and then they make children and then and then we get to the next point, which is they have children and then they set the example for their children to blame everyone else for their problems. And so their children grow up with that behavior and enter society with that behavior and become non-self-starters. And this cycle of perpetual losing just keeps going around and around. Kid becomes adult, marries another loser, pumps out a couple of more squid fucking losers, and then this cycle keeps going around and around until one of them, or maybe all of them, who knows, has some kind of life-changing event that causes them to change the way that they look at the world. And they start to take responsibility for their own actions because they look back and go, maybe they look at their family and go, you know, as a family, we've only ever blamed everyone else for our problems. And I can say this from experience because my family, although one half of my parenting unit did, the other half of my parenting unit did not. And that half of my parenting unit spent a lot of time blaming everyone else for their problems and for their lack of success in life. When in reality, as something that I came to learn as an adult much later on, this person had spent much of their time fucking around. And so as a result, they hadn't accomplished the things that they wanted to accomplish. And they felt, I probably imagine that they felt somewhat belittled by the choices that their partner made. I'm speaking very vaguely here. I do love both of my parents, but one of my parents' shortcomings is well highlighted here, blaming other people for their problems. So getting back to, they're less likely to have and start families. You're going to be unattractive to the kind of people that you want to get with if you're not a self-starter and you don't take responsibility for your actions, because as we talked about, you'll accomplish nothing, so you won't have anything to your name. You'll be unhappy and unfulfilled, and you won't be likely to attract the people that you want because of those things. The people that you will attract will be other losers who will see in you validation for their terrible life choices as well. And then again, if those people have families, then they set an example for the next generation of people to come in and blame the system or blame others for their problems. So we see it's kind of like a path when you look at it like that. If you don't take responsibility for your own actions, if you can't self-start the hand towards the other hand, then nothing gets accomplished. The hands are left unfulfilled. Because they're unfulfilled and they're unhappy, they don't attract a mate. And because they don't attract the mate that they want, they're forced to take whatever mate they can get, which ends up being low-quality mates that are just like them. And then, of course, they have children with those people, and then those children become more people who blame everyone else for their problems. Now, looking at the opposite side of that coin, because the do you or don't you coin when it comes to blaming other people or blaming yourself and taking responsibility for your actions, it is one coin. It's one thing that has two sides. Ultimately, though, each side kind of leads away from the center. It leads away from the middle part where that coin is. And on the one hand, you have people who are blaming everyone else and heading off in the negative direction and setting up for a cycle of negativity. People who take responsibility for their actions walk off in a different direction, and it ends up being the opposite direction. So I talked earlier about blaming other people. You can't change them. The beauty of blaming yourself and taking responsibility for your faults and your failings is that you can change yourself. You are the only person in the entire world that you can change. That's it. You can kind of change your kids. You can kind of change your partners. Yeah, all right, pal. You can kind of change people that are close to you. But in general, the only person in the world that you can truly, truly change is yourself. And that's a liberating thing, because with change can come results, whether it's failure and learning from failures or achieving or accomplishing goals. So you blame yourself, you take responsibility for the actions that you took that got you in a bad position, and now all of a sudden you say, okay, what am I going to do differently? And we'll go back to the two hands here. This hand here says, I'm going to use my inner bicep muscle to pull me over a little bit. And now I've accomplished something. This hand has accomplished something by changing what it did. By taking responsibility for its position, it's changed its situation and it's closer to accomplishing the goal of moving over. This is a very rudimentary way of explaining it, but hopefully it helps to sort of elaborate. So you begin to accomplish things, and it may not be that you accomplish things like crazy right out the bat. It may just be that you fail over and over again, but each of those failures is a lesson for you to learn. It's very rare in life that you will fail at something and there isn't something to be learned from it. And even when those times happen, the world is a crazy, randomized, chaotic place. It's going to happen sometimes. You have to be able to roll with those punches. Sometimes bad things will happen that have nothing to do with you. And if you can't roll with those, if you can't find a way to turn those into a positive, then you will be that perpetuatingly negative person. Anyway, getting back to it. So you've decided you're going to do something. You've taken the step. You've taken the step across. And then you've accomplished something. The feeling of accomplishment gives you satisfaction, makes you happy because you've accomplished some part of your goals, and it makes you more fulfilled in life. Like we talked about earlier, people who aren't happy don't attract good partners. People who are happy or who are fulfilled attract good partners, and those people are more likely to have the kinds of relationships that they want. Healthy relationships where there's communication back and forth and supporting back and forth, and the sense of being able to feel good about what you're doing because you're both moving forward in your lives, supporting each other's successes and failures, and kind of building each other up as you go. If you do that, you will, and you create children or you have people around you who witness what's happening, you will be setting examples for those children or those people that will cause them to want to emulate what you're doing. So you take responsibility for your actions. You make a change. You accomplish something. You feel good about it. You accomplish more. You feel good about it. You accomplish more. Suddenly you've accomplished a big goal and you feel good about it. Your life is good. You are more satisfied with the way things are. You attract the kind of people that you want in your life, and then those relationships create this sort of family. Again, you decide to have kids. Your children see you acting like this. They see you trying things and not blaming everyone else. When they observe you make a mistake, they hear you say, "No, it was my fault. I should have been getting up earlier and making more time to put into that project because I knew that I had a feeling I wasn't giving it enough of my attention." And your children go, "Oh, you can actually self-correct and you can actually choose to do more for things that you want to aim for." You know, a kid plays sports. Let's say the kid plays rugby and they want to learn how to get better at kicking. But they've got a busy schedule. They got school and they got extracurriculars and band and, you know, whatever else. So they decide, and they've been failing at that. And they witness what you've done, take responsibility for your actions and change your behavior so that you can go more towards success. That kid all of a sudden has a model of success, and they can go, "Oh, well, all I need to do is just put a little more time into practice and I'll get the same sort of success." And so all of a sudden they get up earlier and they are kicking the ball more and getting better at it. And then that little tiny model of getting better at kicking the ball through practice becomes a model that they can carry with them into other activities with the guidance from their parents or people around them who say, you see how you did that? Well, you can do the same thing with that, with study, with relationships, with finances, with hobbies, whatever it is that you want to accomplish. This model for success of taking responsibility for your behavioral faults or the things that you didn't or shouldn't, that you didn't do or that you should have done or clearly could have done, by taking responsibility for those things and implementing them, you can move incrementally towards success. And these people go out into the world and they don't blame other people for their problems, and they end up becoming successful and happy. And the cycle, instead of going the bad way, it goes the good way. And these people elevate themselves and elevate their families. And then by elevating, they rise up in position and they become leaders within their groups. Even if they're not actively leading, they become role models and examples for other people around them. And I think that's the key. When I look at what I've been doing recently and what I've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years, I've been insulating myself from the world, and worrying about all the different problems. When I was a heavy liberal, I said I wasn't going to make this political, but when I was a heavy liberal in high school and just out of high school, actually even up until I moved to the States, and maybe 5 years ago, I used to point the finger at everybody else for my problems, the company that fired me, or the government that didn't care, or the corporations that were dumping toxic waste into the ocean, or whatever. These were all things that I couldn't change, and I wasn't focusing any attention on how I interacted with the world. And then I had that low moment, which changed my way of thinking, and I realized the only person who's going to get me out of this situation is me. I can't lean on a psychologist. I can't lean on drugs. I can't lean on my partner. I have to be the one that makes that does the hard work and learns. And so I did. And I did the hard work, and I'm still doing the hard work. But the hard work isn't unenjoyable for me. It's pleasurable. That sounded gross. It's pleasing. Because I know in it that I'm incrementally moving towards success. And that's, I guess, what I wanted to cover today. If you're the kind of person who blames everyone else, think about the fact that you can't change any of those things, and that there is almost 100% guaranteed to be something that you could have done differently that you chose not to do. And then ask yourself, what if, hypothetically, and you don't even have to commit to this, what if, hypothetically, I had chosen to do something differently in that situation? What could the spin-off results have been? And be honest. Don't be a dick about it. Don't be like, oh, it would still have been bad because people are bad. Be honest with the results. Think about them. Play it out in your mind. If I did this, then what would happen? Cause and effect. If this, then what? And if it's even 1% chance that it could have gone better than if you had just taken your hands off and said, it's not my fault, then isn't that a compelling enough reason to start to take responsibility for your own actions? I would argue that it is. Anyway, that's my week 7 rant. Not much of a rant, really. That's all I have for today. Ka kite anō.